where they featured non-traditional family units. And lordy, did the internet explode. People were super angry about that ad. And Honey Maid is one of the brands that are taking more risks in the sort of political space about what they're saying about social culture, what they're saying about their opinions for some of the things that are also being argued in our policy and in our Supreme Court. So this was in 2014, and the Supreme Court ruled on marriage in 2015. So they came out ahead of the decision that made this a far less controversial situation. And what political campaigning and political advertising needs to learn is that if brands are willing to take risks and sort of dip their toe in what would be the political waters, it's time for politics to take a risk and dip their toe in the sort of brand rule column. And that's about how we're reaching voters, when we're reaching voters, what platforms we're using, what lengths of videos we're using, and that has typically not been the way that we've advertised. So after that, do I advance this way? After that video came out, Honey Maid had to respond to it. So a brand is responding in a crisis communication situation as if they're a political campaign. I think this will do it. Sorry, I'm just trying to advance to the next slide. Is that going to
No matter how things change.
Sorry, guys. That's okay. Okay, so brands and politics, and then... believable to a larger audience, and on top of just the audience that didn't care for their branding. So in the world of advertising, the sort of scale of being true and believable is a line that we have to be careful of walking, right? Because the way to get people to do what you want them to do for you, you have to be believable. And believable is more sort of a subjective quality. And usually what you're saying has to be true, and generally speaking, truth is a more objective quality, although that is certainly up for debate more and more. And so where people fall on that spectrum and how it moves people to buy things or vote is what, when you're creating the advertising, is what you're meant to do. So let's watch this ad, and then I'm going to ask you guys if you think it's true or believable afterwards.
Brandon, this is a great date. Brendan, you look so different from your profile picture too. Were you really in Jamaica? Wow. Brandon.
Caitlin? Hi.
Brandon?
Brandon.
Okay. I'll see you inside.
I'll see you inside.
Okay.
Right, so it's humorous, but the message is when you're in a highly stressful situation, is that deodorant really going to make you not sweat? Right, so how many people think that's an actual, like a true statement? That's not going to make you sweat. Who finds that ad believable? Nobody. Tough crowd. All right. Obviously, it's for a particular demographic, but I think that falls more on the believable side than the true side. And then this is a very, very old Yoplait commercial. Maybe some of you will remember, but it is ridiculous.
This is like cute best man good.
No, this is like burning this dress good.
Never having to stand in line at the ladies' room good.
Getting these shoes off good.
Getting put with an usher who's not shorter than you good. Did you see that?
Rich, creamy Yoplait yogurt. It is so good.
Not catching the bouquet good.
Right? It's just yogurt. You know? Like, that is not making that wedding any better. It's just yogurt. It's probably true that it's delicious yogurt, but is it burn that bridesmaid's dress good? I don't think so. So brands take more risks with the believability factor than political ads do. You know, usually we figure out what is most sort of selling proposition about a candidate or a campaign. We partner that with some research about what we think voters want to hear, and then we make a political ad, which is oftentimes true and sort of mildly believable to the right people, and the thing is to try to figure out how to get the ad in front of the people that will find it believable. But that's changing a little bit because the demographic is changing, the amount of people that vote is changing, people that want to vote. There's less people engaged in our democratic system right now. And so we kind of gotta work those angles a little bit more than we have in the past. So a pretty interesting example of this is the Volkswagen example, right? It's brand, obviously they're selling cars, but they broke some laws when they were selling cars and telling us that was one thing but not another thing. And I found these hysterical ads when I was looking around, which you'll see are amazing. Oh, sorry. Not sure it's gonna play. Okay, well, we won't play that ad. But the thing about the diesel thing was that they sold this big story to everybody that their clean diesel was actually clean, and it turns out it wasn't clean. So that was what we thought was a truth and very believable, but then in the end, it wasn't, and so it screwed up a lot of their branding as a brand. So it was, in the beginning it was both true and believable, but in the end, neither. We have a bit of a problem right now in the truth world, and that's sort of what this was, the post-truth era, in that a lot of the places that we thought true really meant truth, that facts were actually facts, people are no longer believing. And our administration is at war with our media and our news outlets. We used to be the people that delivered facts to our living rooms of which we could make judgments going down the line. And all of a sudden we're trying to find out news sources we think to be true and others that aren't true. And then how does that screw with our ability to understand persuasion as it comes at us? We no longer have a definitive reality for what truth is. And so much so that the news outlets are now trying to combat it.
This is an apple. Some people might try to tell you that it's a banana. They might scream banana, banana, banana over and over and over again. They might put banana in all caps. You might even start to believe that this is a banana. But it's not. This is an apple.
CNN is telling people that an apple is an apple, right? Like, it's a thing, we're having a thing, and now there's like a ton of these, there's all these spoofs on an apple is an apple, a monkey, a banana, it's all over the place. But a major news outlet that's been around forever is trying to remind people that when they say something on the news that's supported by experts and grounded by facts and research, that those are the facts and the research. And it's not even really working. So what do we do now? How do we move forward? So I'm going to show, in a little effort to revisit the past, I have an ad from each of the presidential campaigns from the general election. And I want you to think about where does it lie on this spectrum, the true believability spectrum. If they play, let's see. They should.
Hillary Clinton won't change Washington. She's been there 30 years. Taxes went up, terrorism spread, jobs vanished. But special interests and Washington insiders thrived. Donald Trump will turn Washington upside down day one. Real change that puts Americans first. A vote for Hillary is a vote for more of the same. A vote for Donald Trump is a vote for change that makes America great again.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
So PolitiFact called that mostly false, that ad, because all those claims in the first half of the ad, she didn't act alone, essentially. But all the second half of the ad, when Donald Trump's going to turn Washington upside down from day one, I mean, that is clearly true. We are seeing that happen right now. So on the truth believability spectrum, this one's actually not true, but incredibly believable to the people that Donald Trump was trying to campaign towards and the people this ad was in front of. On the other case,
I spent many years as a nuclear missile launch officer. If the president gave the order we had to launch the missiles, that would be it. I prayed that call would never come. Self-control may be all that keeps these missiles from firing.
I would bomb the data.
I want to be unpredictable.
I love war.
The thought of Donald Trump with nuclear weapons scares me to death. It should scare everyone.
I'm Hillary Clinton, and I approve this message.
on the other case, all that's true. None of it's believable to anybody. Trump voters didn't vote for him because they thought he had an even-keeled temper. They voted for him for exactly the opposite reason. But here we are trying to tell people the truth, the severity of this position, the kind of person we thought he was, we think he is. But nobody knows it. Nobody knows whether or not he's gonna do something significant that's going to affect the future. And so it's completely unbelievable. You put all that money behind it and you're just screaming from the mountaintops. But nobody believes you because they think it's too much, it's never gonna happen. But the research probably said that that was a really effective message. He's an incredibly effective messenger, which is half of the job, find people to tell your message in a believable way. But if it falls on deaf ears, it's not gonna do you any good. So from the believability forecast, it's what do people want to hear? Not what should they hear, not what we think they need to hear, not what we know is going to make their life better. But when you think about the way brand advertisers sell their products, they tell people what they want to hear. If you're going to have a date with Brandon, you better use that secret deodorant so that you don't pit out before you date, right? Or if you're trying to get skinny and you also want to feel good, eat Yoplait. But in the political space, trying to identify what you think people want to hear, the believability factor, that is a hard part because it's a little bit more instinctual. It's more qualitative than quantitative. It's more of a gut instinct. And we're afraid of our guts. A lot of us professionals are afraid of our guts these days because we're not quite sure what's up from down. In the case of Donald Trump, people wanted to hear that America was not awesome, and according to them, and they wanted it to be better. And that's sort of it, hard stuff. They didn't really care about the rest. And true, what matters to people? So what do people want to hear? And then what matters to them? And how can you cross-check that with the truth? I don't think that just because advertising in the political space hasn't been awesomely true in the past that we can sort of change our moral compass. We still want to be telling people the truth about what could be in the political world. But we need to do it in a way that they're used to. We need to start to integrate some of the best practices and strategies that are happening in other spaces and apply that to the political space. Because if we don't do that, then all this money that we're raising and spending on persuasion is never gonna talk to people. And I mean, I used Ralph Northam because that was gonna be this close race, and days before I was talking about who's gonna win, and then he ended up winning by a pretty sizable margin in Virginia. And when you go back and look at the advertising, I specifically didn't use some of the examples late in the campaign that were more controversial, but their repetition of qualities, doctor, veteran, and that sort of stuff really ended up working because they found the intersection of truth and believability for people. And then voters, right? So part of changing the way we do this going forward and trying to find best practices in other spaces and applying that to the political space is finding voters again. We've lost voters. The millennials are the largest generation in this country, 80 million millennials in this country, majority of them above voting age, but they don't vote. And that's because they consume advertising and persuasion in ways that our world hasn't really embraced. And so I think learning from the brand space, the corporate space, is going to be what helps us re-engage these voters in our process. I think I tried to quote one of these funny ads right again at the end. Let's see if it works. Anyway, sorry, I was going to end with a funny ad, but it's not working. So apparently, no funny. So that's just sort of the tip of the iceberg in terms of post-truth era. But I don't think it's post-truth. I think it's just a different kind of telling of the truth. I think there's some time for questions.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you, Kelly. If anybody has a question, I will run this microphone over to you. Just raise your hand.
Hi, thank you. It's really great food for thought, this concept of truth versus believability. How would you apply that to this notion that your vote matters? Because getting turnout is really one of the biggest factors that impacts elections.
Yeah.
And I think there's a believability problem with the notion that it matters.
Yeah, I think we should stop saying it. I think it only matters to the voter, right? That your vote matters to what you want to happen in your life. As soon as we can start to convince voters that if they take the time and cast that vote and feel good about that vote and convince them that politics and policy and legislation can actually affect their lives in whichever way they want to. Consumers are narcissistic. Like, I no longer buy anything if it doesn't come to me online, essentially. Like, my whole wardrobe is just like ads that find me. So why would it be any different if we were trying to convince them to, vote, which is, essentially just an action step in consumer behavior. So I think it doesn't matter to people that their vote counts. I think it matters that their government works, and the government works if the right people are in government. The only way to the right people is to vote for the people you trust. I think that we need to flip that theory on its head a little bit and follow some of the best practices, like I said, in other advertising spaces. People are more individualistic than they've ever been, and so I think we need to apply that sort of animal instinct to the voting, to political persuasion, which means we have to use technology better.
Other questions? Yeah.
So I have a question about the opposite side, the brand side. In such a post-truth world where we learned in a lot of ways, and this, I think this has been a trend for the past 10, 15 years, of just a lot of us started paying attention more in 2016 because it was so blatant in front of our faces. But in a world where anybody can lie to your face, it doesn't matter. Are brands gonna lose that standard as well? VW has consequences for lying to us about diesel, but I'm not seeing VW shut down. Like, and not that they deserve to be shut down necessarily, but are we going to see more and more brands lie to our faces because they see that they can probably get away with it?
Well, I guess it's the intensity of the lie, right? The secret ad is a lie. Like, that's not actually going to make me stop sweating. But a lie that affects things that people find to be important in their life. In the case of VW, it was about promising you one thing, and a certain kind of person bought the TDI, right? It's a person that cared about the environment, a person that cared about the drivability, and so that person was personally insulted by the sort of sneaky dealing of that. But I mean, I think that there are objectively truths and lies in this world. I just think that the gray has gotten more significant. And so consumers have to be savvier, but consumers can be savvier because there's so much more information out there that's just coming to them. Consumption is way up. But I think consequences for white lies I think those will diminish greatly. Yeah. Which is why everyone just sort of existing in these little worlds. But in politics, it's our job to find places where there's overlap in that. The brand space is a little different because the way you gauge it changes. But in politics, it's our job to find a random person that is going to make their choice our choice in the end. But what we're learning from the brand space is how we're going to be able to do that, I think. Yeah.
We've got time for one last question if anyone has it. I will ask you a quick question.
Okay.
So a point that was made in the first panel of the day, Ben Angle from National Media was talking about how, when you're in the context of a political campaign, everything is 50% plus one, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if you're a brand, you can have, single-digit market share and exactly. Yeah. Does that, it seems to me to connect very well to what you were talking about, at the start start of your talk when you said, brands, they're willing to take these risks,
Yeah.
right? A lot of brands that are willing to take these risks know that they can flip off 80% of the population and still make their billion, right? So how do you convince campaigns and candidates to do what you think they should do?
Long-term loss. These campaigns are short-lived small businesses that get started and then they live a year or 2 years, raise a ton of money, and then close their doors, essentially. So it's hard to take risks if you're putting that into a silo and that into a vacuum. But if you can start to build best practices by using things you're learning across a bunch of different campaigns where you can make assumptions about the consumers of the information or the risks that need to be taken to win, I think because voters are so unengaged in our process right now because turnout was so low, at least in 16, the only way to win is by getting people re-engaged. The only way to get people re-engaged is to do something different, and if it's different, it's undoubtedly risky and exciting. So, I think because of technology, we just learned with the Humane Society, things like Facebook Live, there are maybe higher risk, low investment options that can help. But it's already starting to happen, at least on the Democratic side, where people are starting to think outside the box and approach things from different angles. And all these candidates got in like crazy earlier than they ever had before, so they're building up their sort of brand identity online, all that kind of stuff. But yes, I think if it's been really, really rhythmic and win, lose, or win, win, lose, but like the lose, like you just have to do something a little different. And so I think that's where people get the balls to be risky.
Kelly Gibson, thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.